Hello and welcome to part 11 of Let's Create a 2D Platformer in the Godot game engine. My name is Colin, and in this tutorial, not so mini series, we're creating this 2D platformer video game. Of course, in this game, you control the player on screen using keys on your keyboard. Of course, you can walk, run, jump, and fall. You can jump on enemies and squash them. You can get hit by and hurt by enemies and lose lives. You can collect coins. You can shoot fireballs. You can do wall jumps. You know how 2D platformer games work. Of course, this is part 11 in this mini-series. If you've not seen any of the past 10 parts, I'll put a link to this whole playlist containing all of my Godot 3 tutorials up on the screen right now, so check those out. As it stands in our project right now, we have a character that can explore a large world. Our camera follows us. We have a parallax background with lots of layers, but in the last video, we started adding coins into our game. So as it stands right now, we have 3 coins. We could have as many as we want, and once your player touches the coin immediately vanishes, and that's where we stand. In this video, we're going to add animations to our coins, which means the coins will do a little bounce animation when your player collides with them, and then we'll be counting the coins. So we're going to add coin counting, and that means that once you've collected, say 5 or 10 or 50 coins, your game will switch scenes over to perhaps a you win screen. In this video though, we're just going to reset the game back to the beginning of level. We're going to reset the game essentially. So if you have not seen the last video in this mini-series in which we started making the coin, we also got into talking about a very important couple of topics called collision layers and collision masks, and this helps us set up our whole scene in terms of what objects are in what collision layer. That means basically you can isolate objects from one another, and therefore you can decide what kinds of objects and what groups can collide with what other kinds of objects. And that's very important in your game unless you want, say, your enemies to be able to collect coins for you. You probably don't want that. That's important. If you've not seen that video, I'll put a link to it up on the screen right now. But let's go ahead and open up the Godot Editor. Of course, if you like this video, if you learned something in it, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps out me and my channel, and I appreciate it immensely. And if you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. So in our game project right now, we have our little Steve character, we have our level, we have a background, we have coins. Let's go ahead and press play scene just to check it out. Our character falls, and of course I can jump around in my level and I can collect the coins. But when I collect a coin, it just vanishes. Let's go ahead and fix that. To edit the coin, we have right now 3 instances of a coin scene in our game. You can tell that by this little icon, or these 3 little icons right here. They mean that these are instances of scenes. So I'm going to go down to my file system doc and I will find my coin.tscn. I'll double click on it to open it up in a different tab. There's level 1, there's the coin tab. And as you can see in this scene, I've got a root node, which is my area 2D. And as a child of that, I have a collision shape, this round circle here. That's where the coin actually detects collisions. And we have an animated sprite, which I have an animation in, which I've called spin, and it just plays these 3 frames at 5 frames per second. Isn't that wonderful? This is not the kind of animation I'm talking about. When our character collides with our coin, we're going to play a keyframed animation of this whole animated sprite while it's still spinning, jumping up and then falling back down. And just as it starts falling back down, then it will vanish, and then the coin will be counted, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But to make keyframe animation in Godot, we need to add a node called an animation player, not animated sprite, but animation player. To do that, I'm going to select my root node. I believe this should work. And I'm going to press the plus button, and I'm going to search for animation player. And it's right here. If you search for anim, I'm sure you'll find it as well. Maybe a little bit harder to find. Animation player. So it's right here. I will double click on it, and there it is. When I have this node select the animation player, I should now have access to an animation dock at the bottom of my screen. Here it is. And this dock is essentially a timeline that lets us place keyframes for pretty much any property of any nearby node. I'm not quite sure of the scope of how many things you can animate how far away. I used to think that you had to have this animation player as a child of the node that you want to make keyframes on. That's not really the case. I'm really not sure. But what you can do, what I do know, is that if you select the animation player node, you can go to this animation button. Yeah, it's a button with a menu, and you can press new. And when you do that, you're creating a new animation that you'll make keyframes in. We're going to make one that makes the coin bounce. So I'm going to call this animation bounce. Yeah, like that. And I'll press OK. And when you do that, then you can really then see a timeline here. These are seconds, so 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. But your animation is only 1 second by default, and that is actually going to be okay for this animation length. But if we wanted to change it, that value is right here. The interface here isn't the best. It doesn't really let you know what this one is for. But if I change this number to 3 and press enter, you can see this grayed out area. Again, the interface isn't great in this doc, I don't think. Why is it grayed out? I don't know. This grayed area shows you how long your animation actually is. I think they should reverse these colors, so the dark part is the part that's active and the grayed out part is. Anyways, what I'm going to do now is select a property of a nearby node. In this case, the animated sprite is what we're actually going to animate. We're not going to animate the entire area 2D. No, we're going to animate just the sprite that's a child of the area 2D. So if I select the animated sprite, now that I've actually made a new animation called bounce, if I select the animated sprite, I can add a track in my animation timeline of pretty much any of a nearby node's properties, especially this animated sprite. I want to animate the transform position of the animated sprite. So I have that animated sprite selected. And what I'm going to look for here are little key buttons that will let me add a keyframe to any of these properties. Now, we don't see those right now. And I was actually kind of thrown for a loop because I was looking for them and I couldn't find them when I tried recording this video a few minutes ago. You will not see any buttons to add a keyframe here for any of the properties until you have this animation dock up. And once you do that, because when you select an animated sprite, it usually switches over to the sprite frames dock down here. You won't see keyframes over here. You have to select the animation dock, and then you'll see these little key buttons. And these little key buttons let you animate that property. So we're going to animate the position of this selected sprite. First though, I'm going to drag my playhead back to frame 1. These are in seconds. So frame 1, and I'm going to press this little key button. When I do that, it's going to ask me, do I want to create a new track for the property position and insert a keyframe at that time? So I'm at 0 now. Yes, I'm going to press create. When I do that, we now have a keyframe telling that sprite to be at this location, the middle of the coin scene, which is what we want, at frame 0, in other words, 0 seconds. I can drag this playhead over, and right now it's incrementing in 1/10 of a second increments. If I don't want that, I could turn off snap. Better yet, I could change this number to say 0.05, and that is 1/20th of a second, according to math. So if I drag this around now, you can see I can increment by 0.5 increments instead of 0.1/10 increments of a second. So I'm going to zoom in. That's what this little slider does. If you drag it to the left, you can zoom in. I'm going to zoom in to 0.6 seconds into the animation, and I'm going to use my arrow tool, and I'm going to drag the sprite up. If you hold shift after you start dragging up, it'll snap upwards. So I kind of like the coin bouncing this much. Okay. Now we haven't set a keyframe at 0.6 seconds yet. So I'm going to tell the coin sprite to be there here at 0.6 seconds by pressing the key button. So we're creating keyframes at different locations at different times. If I drag the playhead in this gray bar area back and forth, you can see what's happening. We have an animation now that we have 2 of these keyframes here. But the animation, the bounce animation, is not yet done because I want the the coin to fall back down again. So at 0.9, I think, I'm going to drag it back down. And once I start dragging down, I can hold shift. And I don't need it to go all the way back down because it's going to vanish by that point. We'll do that in a minute. And with the coin right there at 0.9 seconds, I'm going to press the key button again. So now I've got that keyframe and I have my animation. Now my animation is 3 seconds long. I don't need that. It needs to be 0.9 seconds long. So I'll click in here, 0.9, and press enter. Now, there are a few buttons that you should know about in this timeline while we're here. There is a button for this animation that we're making right now, the bounce animation, to autoplay whenever the game first starts. It is this button right here. So if you create an animation for something else and you want to play right away, you can press that button. We're not going to have that because we want the animation to trigger once our character enters this area 2D. Okay. The other option you might want to try in the future is the loop function, and that is this one right here. If you want the animation to loop over and over and over again and play again and again and again, this button right here, if you enable it, will make the animation loop. So you could have those both on at the same time, but we're not going to use either. What I will do though is I will drag my playhead back to the beginning to frame 0, and I'm going to test this out. So I'm going to do a quick save, Control S on my keyboard, and I'll go back to level 1. I don't want really any of that animation to happen. I just want to make sure that all my coins are back in the same position of the area 2D. So I haven't left my playhead at some other point in the timeline. So now if I press play, everything should be exactly the same. And if I go to my coin, it'll just vanish. What I don't want to happen anymore is I don't want the coin to delete itself when the character first enters that area. I want it to wait a little bit. So we're going to have to add another node in just a moment. What I'm going to do though is go back to my coin scene, and I'm going to go to my coins script now. I'm editing the script on the root node of this scene. So I'll press the little script button. I don't want the coin to delete itself quite yet, so I'm going to comment this line out. If I put a hashtag or a pound symbol, Shift 3 on my keyboard right there, that line will no longer happen. It's complaining to me right now because you have to have some line of code in a function, or if you don't, you have to put the word pass. But instead, we're going to make the animation play in our animation player. So I'm going to put the $, and this is how you access another node in your scene. If you put the $, and then you type the name of a child node, in this case, this code is on the root node, so I can access the animation player quite easily. So if I put $, and then animation player, there it is right there. It gives me a list of the different names that I have access to. And I'm going to put a dot, and now I can run any method that's built into this animation player on this specific instance of the animation player. So I'm going to say play, and this is a method call. So I'm going to put round brackets, and in the round brackets, I'm going to specify a string, which is text in double quotes, the name of the animation that I want to play. In other words, bounce. That's my animation. I believe if I just put play, if I delete this and finish typing play, and then it would list for me automatically all the animations that I have. So you don't have to recall necessarily the name of your animation. It'll give it to you. So let's go ahead and save, and I'll go back to my 2D workspace, and I'll go back to level 1. Let's go ahead and try this out. The coin should no longer disappear, but it should play that animation. Let's go ahead and test this out. I'll press play scene. I'll go up to a coin, and there it is. And it stopped at the end of that animation because the animation is not set to loop. So now technically I believe the area 2D is still down here. And that means if I collide with that invisible area, the animation will play again. But what I want is the coin to delete itself after the animation is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my coin scene, and I'm going to use a signal to trigger the deletion of this whole object, or the instance of the coin that I collided with, using a signal that's part of the animation player. If I select the animation player node and then go over to the node tab, to the signals kind of sub tab, I guess, there are signals for an animation player that are specific to animations. There is a signal called animation finished. So what I want to do is call a block of code, a function, when that bounce animation finishes. So what I can do is, with the animation player node selected, I'll go to the signals tab under the node dock, and I'll double click on animation finished. And of course now it pops up with this window that's asking me, where do you want to put the code, the method, or the function that handles that signal being emitted. So I'm going to select the coin itself, and it's going to have on it now a function called onAnimationPlayer Animation Finished. That's a bit of a long name, but that's the default, and that's okay. So I selected the coin root node, I'll press connect. And as you can see now on my coins script, there's coin.gd there. It's made a new function called onAnimationAnimationFinished. Animation Finished. In this function, we're going to add that cue free code. So I'm going to select it from up here. I'm going to cut it. I'll press Control X on my keyboard to get rid of it there, and I can delete that pound sign or hashtag there. And I'm going to get rid of this pass line and paste the cue free here. So now when the animation is done, the object will delete itself. I will leave this up on the screen for just a moment if you need to pause the video, but please be mindful that there are now two little signal icons next to these two functions. This function is emitted when the player enters the area 2D, and that makes the animation named bounce play. And then we have another signal which links or runs or executes this function that makes the actual whole coin instance delete itself. And if I select the coin itself, it has the body entered signal handled by that first function in its code. And then the animation player has a signal called animation finished, which links up to the coins script. And it has a method called, or a function called onAnimationPlayer Animation Finished, which is again, this function down here. Okay, let's go ahead and try all of this out. I'm going to do a Control S on my keyboard to save the coin scene. I'll go back to my 2D workspace and back to level 1. Let's Control S again to save and play scene. And the game launches. And if I collect a coin, hey, the coin does a little jump. It's too slow. I'll be the first to admit that, but at least it works and it deleted itself after it finished that animation. So what I might want to do here is make that animation quicker. So to do that, I will go back to my coin scene. I'll go back to the animation player. I've got my animation dock down at the bottom. I'm going to drag these keyframes back closer to the beginning to make the animation shorter. And now all I have to do is make this number match my last keyframe. So I'm actually going to go quite a bit quicker. I'm going to go to 0.55. So I'll make my animation that length, 0.55, and press enter. So that gray area now matches the length. And I will do a Control S to save. I'll go back to level 1 and I'll play my scene. Let's see how that works. Oh, you know what? I did not go back to the beginning of my timeline. So you can see right here, the coins don't match, and that's not a good thing. So I need to go back to my coins animation player. It will remember what you left your timeline location at. So if I go back to the beginning, that resets it. Okay, I'll do a Control S to save. I'll go back to level 1. It now matches with the coins in the location of the area 2D's collision shape. So now if I press play scene, if I go and play, the coins are in the right spot. They were too high up before. So now if I collide with the coin, it does its little jump animation, and I might tweak that in the future, but that is an animated coin. How do you collect a coin? Well, if I go into Steve's script, so I'll go back to level 1, go back and click on Steve's little script icon. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to give Steve a variable called coins. And so I'll go up to the top of his code above our physics process delta, and I'm going to make a new variable. I'll make it above my constants here. I'm going to call it var coins. And this is going to be a number variable, so I'm going to make it equal to 0. And what we need to do now is make our coin be able to communicate with Steve. In other words, when a coin gets hit by Steve, we want the coin to essentially send a signal, you could do it that way, to Steve that says, hey, you just collided with me, and so you should count a coin before I destroy myself, before I remove myself from the game. And so then Steve would count that number up or add 1 to that coin variable that we just made. But we're not going to use signals for this because there is an easier way. This would likely require us to create a custom signal, which I will save for a future video. Instead, if I go back to my coin scene and go to my coins script, we actually have access to the physics body that collided with any given coin instance using this parameter, this variable right here. This function called onCoinBodyEntered, if you recall, is the function that runs whenever the signal is triggered by our area 2D. So if I select the area 2D and look at its node signals, the body entered signal runs or executes a function called onCoinBodyEntered, and that function is on the coin itself. But this function has a parameter which basically gives your coin access to run code directly without a signal on the physics body that collided with it. In this case, body really stands for, in this case, our Steve character. So what I can do here is I'm going to add a new line of code, and I'm going to say body dot, and now I can run any code on Steve because Steve really is the body that collided with this coin. So I'm going to jump over to Steve now. This line of code is not done, but we're going to finish it in just a moment. But right now I'm going to go to Steve's script. If you need to go back to level 1 and go and click on Steve's script there, you can, but I've got it right here. I'm going to go down to the bottom of Steve's code, and I'm going to make a new function. And I'm going to make it called add coin, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to add a coin to that coin variable. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my code. I'm going to press enter and backspace a few times so that I'm lined up with the beginning of the new lines of code. I don't want to have any indentations at all. And I can in fact get rid of that little icon that I had there. And I'm going to type func. So we're writing our own function now that's not hooked up to a signal at all. So I'm going to type the name of the function now. I'm going to call it add underscore coin. And when you write a function, you need to put round brackets and then a colon. And then under that line, as long as you indent, the indented code under that line will be the code that is the body of that function. It'll be the code of that function. So I'm going to go to the next line, press tab, and I'm going to say coins equals coins plus 1. Okay, that's a funny looking line of code, but what it does is it adds 1 to that coins variable. Right now, if I scroll up to the top for just a moment, our coins variable at the beginning of our game is set to 0. So when Steve collides with a coin and this add coin function gets called, well, it's going to take the coins variable and it's going to make it equal to, it's going to assign to it the current value of coins, which is 0, plus 1. So it'll take the current value of coins, whatever it is, and at the beginning of the game it's 0, and it'll add 1 to it, and then it'll take that new value of the added together values, and it'll assign it. This is called the assignment operator, and it'll store it or assign it into the variable itself. So if you've collected a few coins, maybe you've got 5 coins, and you collect another coin, it'll make coins equal to 5, the current value of coins, plus 1. Okay, it's kind of a long way of saying it. Yes, if you know how to program already, there are shorter ways of writing this line. This is kind of the most expanded, easy to understand version of this line of code. So if you need to pause the video and add this function, make sure it's not indented like that or something. Make sure it's lined up nicely. Now, we're going to call this function from another script. I'm going to save. I'll do a Control S on my keyboard on Steve's code. I'll go back to the coin. Remember that we said that we were going to finish this line? When the coin's area 2D is entered by a physics body, we're going to call on that body right here the function called add underscore coin. And when you call a method, of course, you have to, or a function, you have to put its round brackets like that, and we're good to go. This method of accomplishing this coin counting is a little bit dangerous because it assumes that there is a function called add coin on the body, and if some other physics body happens to enter the coin's area and it doesn't have an add coin function, so it's not your character, well, your game might crash. So be mindful of that, and that's another reason why having, I'll go back to my 2D workspace and I'll select my Steve object and go back to the inspector. That's especially why having these collision layers and collision masks set up properly and understanding them is really, really important. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you need to see that code again, I'll put it up on the screen right now and I'll let you pause the video. But we have one more thing to do. We are counting coins on Steve, but we have not said if you collect 3 coins, you win the game. And that's what we want. So I'm going to save the script on coin, Control S to save. I'll go back to Steve's code. Right now we've got this add coins function, which just does what it says. But we also have our physics process function, which is our game loop, which runs all the code in this function. So all of this code right here gets run 60 times per second if the computer can. But what I'm going to say in here somewhere, probably at the bottom, indented like all the other lines are in that function, we're going to say if coins is equal to, and yes, this is two equal signs. That's the operator, the symbol that checks for equality. It's a little bit different than the assignment operator, which is one equal sign. When you put two, it's comparing two things. So I'm going to put if coins is equal to 3, well, what do I want to have happen? I'll put my colon, I'll press enter. We're indented one more time. I want to change the game screen back to perhaps a you win screen. In this case, we're going to reset our level. Do you recollect what the code is to change your scene? Well, if you don't, if you do, good, pause the video, type it out. If you don't, here it is. Get underscore tree. This is a method call. So bracket, bracket, dot, change scene. And then in these round brackets, because you're calling a method, you're going to put in quotes the name of, or the path to the scene that you want to change to. In this case, I'm going to change to my level 1. So I'll select it. Here's the full path, res colon / level 1.tscn. So I'll copy that, Control C, paste it, Control V in there. Okay. So if the coins are equal to 3, and yes, it's checking that 60 times per second. Yes, there's probably more efficient ways of doing this, but this isn't a terrible way for now. Let's go ahead and I'll give you a sec to get this into your code. It needs to be lined up with all the other if statements essentially in your physics process on your Steve code. And here it is. I'll do a quick save. Let's go back to our 2D workspace and I will see if I can win the game. Let's go ahead and collect a coin, and it does this little animation jump, and there it is. The game reset. If you have any problems with this, what you can do is you can print to your output area and see what's going on. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to Steve's script, I'll click on the little script icon, and I go to Steve's add coin function. Well, I'm going to make the coins equal to the coins plus 1. That adds up the coins, or adds 1 to the coins. What I can do here, or really anywhere in my code that's appropriate, is I can run the print method. And this is how you print to the screen. And so if I say, I now, in quotes, I now have this many coins. And then I'm going to concatenate. That means attach a variable here, coins, and you concatenate in the print function or method in Godot with a comma. So it'll say now, I have this many coins. At the beginning of the game, it'll say, well, whenever it collects its first coin, it'll say 1, and you get what's happening here. So if I save this and I go back to level 1 and I press play scene, and now if I collect a coin, down in my output area, it says I now have this many coins, 1. And if I collect another coin, it says I have now this many coins, 2. And you can track what's going on. Of course, you won't want to keep that in your final code, so I will just comment that out for now. And before I export, I'll actually delete that line. Okay, so that will be it for this video. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps out me and my channel. And if you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. Check out my Facebook page and my Instagram page. In those two places, I post sneak peeks and previews of what I'm working on next. It's where I communicate with you guys the most, besides here on YouTube. But that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.